Nikolai Gogol. The Nose, Part 2. The worthy clerk listened to this with a grave expression while at the same time trying to count the number of letters in the note wrote to him. All around stood a great many old women, sales open, and house porters with notes. One of them offered for sale a coachman of sober conduct, another a little used carriage brought from Paris in 1814. Still others a 19-year-old serf girl experienced in laundering work and a young and fiery dappled grey horse 17 years old, turnip and radish seed, newly received from London, a summer residence with all the opportunities, to wit 2 stalls for horses and place for planting a grove of birches or firs. There was also an appeal to those wishing to buy old boots soles, inviting them to appear for final bidding every day, between 8 and 3 o'clock. The room in which this entire company was crowded was small, and the air in it was extremely thick. But collegator Sir Cavallo was not in position to notice the smell, because he kept his handkerchief pressed to his face, and because his nose itself was goodness knows where. "My dear sir, may I ask you? It's very urgent," he said at last with impatience. Presently, 2 rebels 43 kopecks. Just a moment. 1 rebel 64 kopecks, recited the grey-haired gentleman, tossing the nose into the face of the old woman and house porters. What can I do for you?" he said last time, turning to Cavallo. "I wish," said Cavallo, "there has been a swindle or fraud. I still can't find. I just wish to advise that whoever hands this scoundrel over to me, I will receive an adequate reward. Allow me to inquire, what is your name?" "What do you want my name for? I can't give it to you. I have many acquaintances. Mr. Chektovaria, the wife of State Councillor Pelagia Grigorievna Potihona, the wife of field officer. What if they suddenly were to find out? Heaven forbid! You can simply write down a collegator, or still better, person holding the rank of major." "And was the runaway your wholesale?" "What do you mean, wholesale serf? That wouldn't be such a bad swindle. The runaway was my nose." What a strange name. And did this Mr. Nosso rob you a big sum?" "My nose. I mean to say, you misunderstood me. My nose, my very own nose, has disappeared goodness nowhere. The devil must have wished to play on trick on me." "But how did it disappear? I don't quite understand it." "Well, I can't tell you how, but the main thing is that is now gallivanting about the town and calling itself a state councillor. And that is why I'm asking you adversite that whoever apprehends it should deliver to me immediately and without delay. Judge for yourself. How indeed can I do without such a conspicuous part of my body? It isn't like some little toe which I put into my boot and no one can see whether it is there or not. On Thursday I call out house of Mr. Chektovaria, a state councillor's wife, Mr. Potihona, Pelagia Grigorievna, a field officer's wife, and her very pretty daughter, are also very good friends of mine, and you can judge yourself. How can I know? I can't appear at their house now." The clerk thought hard, his lips pursed slightly in witness therefore. "No, I can't insert such an advertisement in the paper," he said at last, after a long silence. "How so? Why?" "Well, the paper might lose its reputation if everyone writes the noses had run away. Why? As it is, people say too many absurd stories and false rumors are printed." "But why is the business absurd? I don't think anything of the sort." "That's what you think. But take last week. There was another such case. A civil servant came in, just as you have, bringing a note, was billed 2 rubles 73 kopecks, and all the advertisement consisted of was that black-coated couple had run away. Doesn't seem the amount amount much, does it now? But it turned out to a libel. This is so-called puddle was treasure. Of I don't recall what's in situation. But I'm not putting in an advertisement about a puddle. It's about my very own nose. That is, practically the same as about myself. No, I can't possibly insert such an advertisement. But when my nose actually has disappeared, if it has disappeared, then it's doctor's business. They say there are people who can fix you up with any nose you like. However, I observe that you must be a man of gay disposition and fond of kidding in company. I swear to by all the holy. Perhaps, if it comes to that, I will show you. Why trouble yourself? Continued the clerk, taking a pinch of snuff. However, if it isn't too much trouble, he added, moved by curiosity, I would like to have a look. The collegator removed the handkerchief from his face. Very strange indeed, said Clark. It's absolutely flat like pancake fresh off griddle. Yes, incredibly smooth. Well, will you go on arguing after this? You see yourself that you can't refuse the print of my advertisement. I will be particularly grateful, and I'm very glad that this opportunity has given me the pleasure of making your acquaintance. The major, as we can see, decided this time to use a little flattery. To insert it would be easy enough, of course, said Clark, but I don't see any advantage you in it. If you really must, give it someone who with a skillful pen and let him describe this is rare phenomenon of nature. Publish this little item in Northern B. He took another pinch of snuff. For the benefit of the young. Here he whipped his nose. Or just so, as a matter of general interest. The collegator felt completely discouraged. He dropped his eyes to the lower part of the paper where the theatrical performance were announced. His face was about to break out into a smile as he came across the name of the pretty actress, and his hand went to his pocket to check whether he had a blue note, because, in his opinion, field officers thought it stalls. But the thought of his nose spoiled it all. The clerk himself seemed to be moved by Kovalev's embarrassing situation, wishing at least to ease distress deemed to appropriate to express his sympathy in few words. I really am grieved that such a thing happened to you. Wouldn't you care for a pinch of snuff? It dispels headaches and melancholy. It's even good for hemorrhoids. With those words, the clerk offered Kovalev his snuff-box, rather deftly snapping open the link, which pictured a lady in a hat. This unpremeditated action made Kovalev lose all patience. I can understand how you find this time for jokes, he said angrily. Can't you see that I lack the very thing one needs to take snuff? To hell with your snuff. I can't bear that side of it now. Even if you offered me so rape it itself, let alone your wretched presence. After saying this, he left the newspaper office deeply vexed and went to visit the entire parallel. Went to visit the district police inspector, a man with passion for sugar. In his house, the entire parlor, which served also as the dining room, was stacked with sugar loaves, which local tradesmen brought to him out friendship. At the moment, his cook was pulling off the inspector's regulation two boots. His sword and all his military trappings were already hanging peacefully in the corners, and his 3-year-old son was reading for his Redipoptil concert hat, while the inspector himself was preparing to taste the fruits of peace after this day of warlike martial pursuits. Kovalev came in at the moment when the inspector had just grunted and said, "Oh, for a couple of hours, good snooze." It was therefore easy to see that Collegator had come at quite the wrong time, and I wonder whether he would have been welcome even if he had brought several pounds of tea or a piece of cloth. The police inspector was great patron of all arts in manufactures, but he preferred the banknote to everything else. This is the thing he would usually say. There can be nothing better than it. It doesn't ask for food. It doesn't ask much space. It is always fit in the pocket, and if you drop it, it won't break. The inspector received Cavallo rather coolly and said that after dinner was hardly time to conduct investigations. That nature itself intended that man should rest a little after a good meal. From this the collegator could see the enormous of the Asian states where the unknown police inspector that no real gentleman would allow his nose to pull off, and that there were many measures in this world who hadn't even decent underwear and hung about in all sorts of disreputable place. This loss was too close for comfort. It must be observed that Cavallo was extremely quick to take offense. He could forgive whatever was said about himself, but never anything that referred to rank or title. He was even of opinion that in one could allow reference to junior officers, but that there should be no criticism of field officers. His reception by the inspectors so disconcerted him that he tossed his head and said with an air of dignity and spreading his arms slightly, "I confess that after such offensive remarks on your part, I have nothing more to add," and left the room. He came hardly able to stand on his feet. It was already dusk. After all this fruitless search, his apartment appeared to him melancholy, or extraordinarily squalid. Coming into the entrance hall, he caught sight of his wallet Ivanhoe, lying on his back and on the soiled leather sofa, was spitting at the ceiling and rather successfully hitting one and the same spot. Such indifference on the man's part infuriated him. He struck him on the forehead with his hat, saying, "You pig, always doing something stupid." Ivan jumped up abruptly and rushed to take off his cloak. Entering the room, the major tired and sank into an armchair and at last, after several sighs, said, "Oh Lord, what have I done to deserve such misery? Had I lost an arm or leg, it would not have been so bad. Had I lost my ears, it would have been bad enough to nevertheless bearable. But without a nose, a man is good goodness knows what. He is not a bird, he is not a human being. In fact, just take him and throw him out of the window, and if at least it had been chopped off in battle or in duel, or if I myself had been to blame, but it disappeared just like that, with nothing at all to show for it. But no, it can't be," he added after some thought. "It's unbelievable that nose should disappear. Absolutely unbelievable. I must be either dreaming or just imagining it. Maybe somehow, by mistake, instead of water, I drank vodka, which I rubbed on my chin after after shaving. That fool Ivan didn't take it away and probably gulped it down. To satisfy himself he was not drunk, the major pinched himself so hard he cried out. The pain he felt fully convinced him that he was wide awake. He stealthily approached the mirror and first half closed his eyes, thinking that perhaps the nose would appear in its proper place. But the same moment he sprang back, exclaiming, "What a character of face!" It was indeed incomprehensible. If a silver spoon, watch, or some such thing had disappeared, but to disappear, and for whom to disappear, and besides in his own apartment too, after considering all the circumstances, Major Cavallo was inclining to think that most likely it was the fault of none other than field officer's wife, Mr. Potochihona, who wanted him to marry her daughter. He took like to flirt with her but avoided a final showdown. And when the field officer's wife told him point blank that she wanted to marry her daughter to him, he eased off on his attentions, saying that he was still young, that he had to serve another 5 years when he would be exactly 42, and so the field officer was presumably in revenge had decided to put a curse on him and hired for this purpose some old witch woman, because it was impossible even to suppose that the nose had been simply cut off. No one had entered his room. The barber Ivan Nikolaevich had shaved him as recently as Wednesday and throughout that whole day, and even on Thursday his nose was all there. He remembered and knew it very well. Besides, he would have felt the pain, and no doubt, and the wound could not have healed so soon, and be as smooth as pancake. Different plans of actions occurred to him. Should he formally summon Mrs. Potihonina to court out, go to her himself and expose her in person? His reflections were interrupted by light breaking through all the cracks in the door, which told him Ivan had lit the candle in the hall. Soon Ivan himself appeared, carrying it before him and brightly illuminating whom. Cavalio's first gesture was to snatch his handkerchief and cover the place where his nose had been only the day before, so that indeed silly fellow would not stand there gaping at such an oddity in his master's strange appearance. Only had Ivan gone into his cubbyhole when an unfamiliar voice was heard in the hall saying, "Does Collegiate Assessor Cavallo live here?" "Come in, Major Cavallo is here," said Cavallo, jumping up quickly and opening the door. In came a police officer of handsome appearance with side whiskers that neither too light nor too dark, and rather full cheeks, the very same who at the beginning of this story was standing at the end of St. Isaac's bridge. "Did you happen to mislay your nose?" "That's right. It has been recovered." "What are you saying?" exclaimed Major Cavallo. He was tongued with joy. He stared at police officer standing in front of him, and whose full lips and cheeks a trembling light of candle flickered. "How?" "By an odd piece of luck. He was interrupted on the point of leaving town. He was about to board stagecoach and leave for Riga. He even had a passport made out a long time in the name of certain civil servant. Strangely enough, I also at first take him for a gentleman, but fortunately I had my glasses with me, and I saw at once it was a nose. You see, I'm nearsighted, and when you stand before me all I can see is that you have a face, but I can't make out if you have a nose or beard or anything. My mother-in-law, that is, my wife's mother, can't see anything either." Cavallo was beside himself. "Where is it? Where? I will run there at once." "Don't trouble yourself, knowing that you need it. I have brought it with me. And the strange thing is that the chief villain the business in rascally barber from Voznesky Street, who is now in lockup. I have long suspected him of drunkenness and theft, and as recently that day before yesterday he stole a dozen buttons from a certain shop. Your nose is quite in order." With these words the police officer reached into his pocket and pulled out a nose wrapped in piece of paper. "That is it," shouted Cavallo. "That's it. All right. Do join me in a little cup of tea today." "I would consider great pleasure, but I simply can't. I have to drop in a mental asylum. All food prices have gone up enormously. I have my mother-in-law, That's my wife's mother, living with me and my children. The eldest is particularly promising. A very clever lad, but we haven't means to educate him. Cavallo grasped his meaning and snatching up a red banknote from the table, thrust it into hands of Inspector who, clicking his heels, went out door. Almost the very same instant Cavallo heard his voice out in the street, where admonishing with his first stupid peasant, who had driven his car onto the boulevard. After the police officer had left, the collegiate store remained for a few minutes in sort of indefinable state, and only after several minutes recovered capacity to see and feel. His unexpected joy and had made him lose his senses. He carefully took the newly found nose in both his cupped hands and once again examined truly. That's it, all right, said Major. Here on the left side is pimple which swelled up yesterday. The Major very nearly laughed with joy. But there is nothing entering in this world, and this is why even joy is not keen a moment of that follows the first, and a moment later it grows weaker still and finally marks imperceptibly into one's usual state of mind, just as ring on water made by fall of a pebble merges finally into smooth surface. Cavallo began to reflect and realized that whole business was not yet over. The nose was found, but it still had to be affixed, put in its proper place. And what if it doesn't stick? At this question, addressed to himself, the Major turned place. Seized by unaccountable fear, he rushed to the table and drew the looking glass closer. To avoid affixing the nose crookedly, his hands trembled. Carefully and deliberately, he put it in its former place. Oh, horror! The nose wouldn't stick. He carried it to mouth, warmed it slightly with his breath, and again put it to smooth place between his two cheeks. But the nose just wouldn't stay on. Well, come on, you fool, he kept saying it too. But the nose was as too made of wood and plopped back on the table with strange crackle sound. The Major's face, twisted in convulsion, won't it really grow on? He said fearfully. But no matter how many times he tried to fit it proper place, his efforts were unsuccessful as before. He called Ivan and sent him for the doctor, who occupied the best apartment on the first floor of the same house. The doctor was fine figure man. He had beautiful pitch-black side whiskers, a fresh, healthy wife, ate raw apples with first thing in the morning, and kept his mouth extraordinarily clean, rising it every morning for nearly 3/4 of 1 hour and polishing his teeth with 5 different kind of little brushes. The doctor came out once. After asking him how long ago the mishap had occurred, he lifted Major Cavallo's face by the chin and flicked him with his thumb on the very spot where the nose used to be. So the Major had threw his head back with such force that he hit the back of against the wall. The doctor said this didn't matter, and suggesting to move a little away from wall, told him to first bend his head to right, and after feeling the spot where the nose had been, said, Then he told him to bend his head to left and said, And in conclusion, he again flicked him with his thumb so that Major Cavallo jerked his head like a horse whose teeth are being examined. Having carried out this test, the doctor shook his head and said, No, can't be done. You would better stay like this, or we might make things even worse. Of course it can be stuck on. I dare say I could do it right now for you, but I assure you it will be worse for you. I like that. How am I to remain without a nose? Said Cavallo. It couldn't possibly be worse than now. This is simply a hell of a thing. How can I show myself anywhere in such a scandalous state? I have acquaintances in good society. Why this evening? Now, I'm expected at parties in 2 houses. I know many people. Miss Chektovaria, a state consular's wife, Mrs. Pochitogna, a field officer's wife. Also, after what she's done, now I will nothing more to do with her expect through to police. I appeal to you, pleaded Cavallo. Is there no way at all? Fix it one somehow, even if not very well. Just say so it says on. In an emergency, I could even prop it up with my hand, and besides I don't dance, so can't do any harm by some careless movement. As regards my grateful acknowledgment of your visits, be assured that, as far as my means allow. Would you believe it, said Doctor in a voice that was neither loud nor soft but extremely persuasive and magnetic. I never treat people out of self-interest. This is against my principle and my calling. It is true that I charge of my visits, but solely in order not upon my refusal. Of course I could affix your nose, but I assure you, on my honor, if you won't take my word, then that it would be much worse. Rather, let nature take its without a nose. You will be healthy as if you had one. As for it nose itself, I advise you put nose in jar with alcohol, or better still, pour into the jar 2 tablespoons of aqua fortis and round up vinegar, and then you get good money for it. I'll buy it myself, if you don't ask too much. No. I won't sell for anything, exclaimed Major Cavallo in desperation. Let it rather go to blazes. Excuse me, said the doctor, bowing himself out. I wanted to be some use to you. Never mind. At least you saw my goodwill. Having said this, Doctor left the room with a dignified air. Cavallo didn't even notice his face, and his benevolent state saw nothing but cuffs of his snow-white shirt peeping out the sleeves of his black tailcoat. The very next day he decided, before lodging a complaint, to write to Mrs. Potocchihona, requesting her to restore him to him as due without a flag. The letter ran as follows: Dear Madame Alexandra, I fail to understand your strange behavior. Be assured that, acting in the way, you gain nothing, and certainly will not force me to marry your daughter. Believe me that the incident with my nose is fully known to me, just as it is fact that you, and no one else, are the principal person involved. Its sudden detachment from its place, its flight and its disgust, first as certain civil servant, then at last in its own shape, is nothing other than the result of spell cast by you or by those who engage like in such noble pursuits. I for my part deem it my duty or to forewarn you that if the above mentioned nose is not back in its place this very day, I shall be forced to resort to defense and protection of the law. Whereupon I have the honor to remain, with my full respect, your obedient servant, Platon Kovalyov. Dear Sir, Platon Kuzmich, your letter came as complete surprise to me. I frankly, especially as regards to you, unjust reproaches. I beg to inform you that I never received in my house the civil servant to you mentioned, neither in my disgust nor in actual shape. It's true that Philip Ivanovich Potonikovich had been visiting me, and true he did indeed seek my daughter's hand, being himself of good sober conduct and great learning. I never held out any hopes to him. You also mention your nose. If by this you mean I wanted to put your nose out of joint, that is, to give you a formal refusal, then I am surprised to hear you mention it. For I, as you know us, was of the exactly opposite opinion. And if you know my sick daughter in marriage in the loveful way, I am ready to give you immediately satisfaction, for this has always been to object to my keenest desire, in the hope of which I remain always at your service. Alexandra Potochihona. No, said Kovalyo after he said. She certainly isn't greatly impossible. The letter is written in way no person quality in creme can write. The collegator was unexpected in the matter, having several times to take part to judicial investigation while still serving the Caucasus. How then? How on earth could this happen? The devil alone can make it out, he said at last dejected. In meantime, rumors of the extraordinary occurrence had spread all over capital, and, as is usual in such cases, not without some special acquisitions. In those days, the minds of everybody were particularly inclined toward things extraordinarily. Not long before, the whole town had shown an interest in experiments with the effects of hypnotism. Moreover, the story of dancing chair in Konyeshuan Street was still fresh in memory, and one should not be surprised therefore that soon people began saying to Collegator Kovalyov's nose when strolling along Nevsky Avenue and precisely 3 o'clock. Throngs of curious people came there every day. Someone said the nose was in Junker's store, and such a crowd and jam was created outside Junkers. The police had to intervene. One profit seeker of respectable appearance, white with side whiskers, who sold a variety of dry pastries and at the entrance of the theatre, had specially constructed an excellent study wooden benches, on which he invited curious to months for 80 kopecks apiece. One veteran colonel made a point of leaving his house earlier than usual, and with much difficulty made his way through the crowd. But to his great indignation, saw in the window of the shop, instead of nose, an ordinary woolen undershirt and a lithograph showing a young girl straightening her stung and dandy with labelled waistcoat and small beard, peeping at her from behind a tree. A picture which had been hanging in the same place for more than 10 years. Moving away, he said with annoyance, "How can they confound the people by such silly and unlikely rumors?" Then a rumor went round that Major Kovalyov's nose was out for a stroll, not on Nevsky Avenue but in Tatra Gardens, that it had been there for 8, that when Khosrow Mirza lived there, he marveled greatly at this strange freak of nature. Some students from the surgical academy went there on a respectable lady in special letter to Spindle of the Gardens, asked him to show her children this rage phenomenon, accompanied, if possible, with an explanation edifying and instructive for the young. All the men about town, the habitues of society parties, who liked to amuse ladies and whose resources had by that time had been exhausted, were extremely glad of all these goings on. A small percentage of respectable and well-meaning people were extremely displeased. One gentleman said indignantly that he could not understand how in this enlightened age such senseless stories could spread, and that he was surprised that government failures to take heed of it. The gentleman apparently was one of those gentlemen who would like to embryo of the government in everything, even in the daily quarrels with their wives after the death. But here again, the whole incident is shrouded in fog, and what happened afterwards is absolutely unknown. Part 3. Utterly nonsensical thing happen in this world. Sometimes there is absolutely no rhyme or reason in rank of the state concealer and created such a had such strange city found itself again as thoughts thinking were the matters in proper place. That is to say, between two cheeks of Major Cavallo, this happened on April 7th. Waking up and chancing to look in the mirror, he sees his nose. He grabbed it with his hand, his nose, indeed. I have said Cavallo, and in his joy, he very nearly broke into a barefooted dance around the home, but Ivan's entry stopped him. He told Ivan to bring him some water the washing hand, and while washing, glanced again the mirror, his nose, drying himself with his towel. He again glanced at the mirror, his nose. Take a look, Ivan. I think there's a pimple on my nose, he said, and in the meantime too. Oh, awful, Ivan says. Why no, sir? Not only there is no pimple, but the also itself is gone. But Ivan said, nothing, sir. No pimple. Your nose is fine. That's great, damn it. The major said to himself, snapping his fingers at the moment to barber Ivan Yakovlevich peeped in at the door, but as timidly as cat which had just been whipped for stealing blood. First you tell me, are your hands clean? Kovalyov shouted to him before he approached. They are. You are lying. I swear they are. Well, we will see. Kovalyov sat down. Ivan Yakovlevich dried him with a napkin and instantly, with the help of shaving brush, transformed his chin and part of his cheek into the whipped cream served at merchants' namesday parties. Well, I never, Ivan Nikolaevich said to himself, glancing at his nose, and cocked his nose on the other side and looked at sideways. Look at that. Just you try and figure that out, he continued, and took good look at the nose. At last, gently, with the greatest care imaginable, he raised two fingers to grasp it by tip. Such was Ivan Nikolaevich's method. No, look out there, cried Kovalyov, dumbfounded and confused as never before in his life. Ivan Nikolaevich let his hand drop. At last began constantly tickling him at chin, and it wasn't all handy for him and difficult to shave without holding on the olfactory portion of the face. Nevertheless, somehow bracing his gnarled thumb against the cheek and lower jaw, he finally overcame all obstacles and finishing the shaving. When everything was ready, Kovalyov hastened to dress, a hired cab, and straight to the coffee house. Before he was properly inside the door, he shouted, "Boy, a cup of chocolate," and immediately made for the mirror. The nose was there. He turned round cheerfully and looked ironically, slightly screwing up one eye at two military gentlemen, one whom had nose, one bigger than waistcoat button. After that, he set off for the office of the department where he was trying to obtain a post of vice-governor. Failing that, of a procurement officer passing through the reception room. He glanced in the mirror. The nose was great. Then he went to visit another collegiate assessor or major, a great wag, to whom he once said various derisive remarks. "Oh, come off it. I know you're a kidder." On the way there, he thought, if the major doesn't explode with laughter on seeing me, it's sure sign that everything is on its proper place. The collegiate assessor didn't explode. That's great, damn it, Kovalyov told himself on the street. He met Mrs. Potchohona, the field officer's wife, together with her daughter, bowed to them and hailed with joyful exclamations, and saw everything was all right. No part of him was missing. He talked with them a very long time and deliberately taking off his snuff-box. Right in front of them, kept stuffing his nose with snuff at both entrances for a very long time, saying to himself, "So much for you. You woman, you stupid hands. I won't marry to daughter all the same. Anything else, Paramu, by all means. And from the time Major Cavallo went strolling about as though nothing had happened, both on Nevsky Avenue and in the theaters, and everywhere, and his nose too, as if nothing had happened, stayed on his face, betraying no sign of having played turnaround. And thereafter, Major Cavallo was always seeing good Amers, smiling, running after absolutely all the pretty ladies, and was even stopping him in front of little shop, Ghostly Dvor, buying himself of ribbons of some order, goodness knows why, for he hadn't been decorated with any order. That's the kind of affair that he happened in northern capital of West Empire. Only now, one second thought, can we see that there is so much improbable in it, without speaking of the fact that his supernatural detachment of the nose and appearance in various places in the guise of state consigliere is indeed strange. How is it that Cavallo did not realize that one does not advertise for one's nose to newspaper office? I don't mean that side advertising rates appear too high. That's nonsense, and I'm not one of the mercenary people, but it's improver, embracing, not nice. And then again, how did the nose come to be nearly backloved about our Nikolaevich? No, this is not something I can understand, possibly can understand. But the strangest, the most incomprehensible thing of all is how others can such subjects. I confess that this is quite invincible. It is indeed. No. I just can't understand it all. In the first place, there is absolutely no benefit in it for the Waterland. In the second place, there is no benefit either. I simply don't know what to make it of. And yet, in spite of it all, true, of course, we may assume this and that and the other perhaps even. And after all, we're incredulous. But all the same time, when you're thinking about there really is something in this all, whatever anyone says, such things happen in this world. Rarely, but they do. Voicing by Yağmur Ekmekçi. Teacher Fatma Boztepe. School Beşiktaş Atatürk Anatolian High School. Group 1.